Welcome back to my podcast. And the reason I'm announcing it that way is, to be very honest, I am in a bit of a transition in my life once again. And if you know anything about human design, you will know that or notice that I am a manifesting generator. And if you look back on my career, there are a lot more twists and turns than other people experience. And the only reason I offer that from a lens of comparison is because only about 35% of the population really craves the ability to create nonlinear progression in their careers. And I am in that percentage. So chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you are also multi-passionate, and that can be, and a high producer, and those can be signs that you might be a manifesting generator. It wouldn't surprise me if you are, because, and I should probably do a whole podcast on human design and what I learned from it, because it's so powerful as a tool. And there's so much that I've learned. But one of the things that I've learned is to give myself a lot of grace around pivots and evolutions and permission to just continue to navigate what feels the most aligned. So honestly, there's a good chance that I rename this podcast the Golden Robe Talks, or because if you're watching me, you know that I always wear a golden robe for this. It just puts me in like this energy that I really like. And so I kind of have a sacredness that this robe only goes on when I put a microphone in front of my face and I'm ready to share what I'm breaking down in my own life. At least that feels really fun and light and fresh, and that's what I'm up to. I've also been very tempted to just rename the podcast the Paid and Hughes Podcast, simply because I don't know what twists and turns it will take. I simply know I'm committed to it always being a reflection of what I'm learning and loving in my life. And so in that spirit, I want to talk today about forgiveness. I know it feels dense, and younger 16-year-old version of me would have been like, ooh, like kind of a flaccid moment as a listener to be like, ooh, that's great. Not exactly what I had in mind. But my intuition is telling me this is really important for the listeners and my kind of group that I connect with, because it's been such an overarching theme for me. And I talk a lot about the energetics around success. I talk a lot about if you're a female identifying human who is trying to coordinate your energies to be in the highest alignment and the most successful, you might be exploring, how much am I in my masculine, driving, taking action, being super in my logical mind, pushing, chasing, hunting, versus more of my feminine side, which is more intuitive, creative, evolving. I don't want to say ungrounded, because there is a groundedness to the feminine, but there can also be a sense of, will they land? Or are they constantly in a perpetual flux and evolution? And one of the areas that I have found to kind of hold me into more of a masculine energy is around all of my wounds, scars, and scabs as a human. And this led me onto, and I'll just say this, a lot of the work that I've personally done in the last year is around shadow work and karma clearing. You don't have to believe in karma. My guess is if you're listening to me, you're open to it. But I didn't know what to make of karma, because it felt like this thing that I didn't know how to control. I didn't know how to know. And so then I became an Akashic Records reader, and karmic clear had to create I didn't create. I learned a system of understanding the Akashic Records and how things that we experience in past lives can carry charges, emotional charges, into our current reality that don't make sense to us. And I don't know about you, but I have had my fair share of moments where I am in a reactive state that I cannot explain. And hell, a therapist could not explain, based on my childhood, the people in my life, and my lived experience from this vantage point. And while epigenetics would suggest, and definitely can prove, and they've done a ton of studies about this, while 20 years ago, this was just laughable information, which is funny because I was a teenager back then. So it was like a joke when I was a teenager, but now this is legitimate study and taught in universities. which is that you actually carry the emotional triggers and the felt experiences in your body up to 13 generations. And this morning, I even heard a doctor say up to 20 generations. So imagine, if you will, 20 generations from now. And in my head, I'm in the 1500s. I don't even know if the math checks out. But like, imagine all the shit that people in the Tudor time of England had to deal with. The arranged marriages, the shaming if you had a baby out of wedlock, the burning of witches. Like, I mean, just like, so women can't have any money, can't have any control. You're pretty much just stuck in whatever class you were born in. Depending on your skin color, you may or may not be enslaved. Like, it is wild to think about that. And obviously, there are so many perpetrations of injustice that go into the 1900s. You know, we don't even have to go back to the 1500s to find so much trauma. So there's epigenetics, which means that we might be triggered. And there's also past lives, which I believe that this is by no means my first rodeo. I have had old soul energy since I was born. I have had an ability to read and understand people in very profound ways. And I've had an ability my whole life to read people's feelings and energies before they even were aware of it. It continues actually to piss people off. And I now don't just try to front my read on them, because I have realized now it is not always welcome. But when I was a kid, I didn't have a filter for it. And I would just kind of go like, oh, why are you angry? And they'd be like, what makes you think I'm angry? And you'd be like, everything, actually. Everything makes me think that you're angry. And I would trigger the fuck out of people. And I still actually am realizing that. So going to why I'm even talking about forgiveness is I can feel in my life that there is a lot that is clearing, that there is room being made in my life to welcome in a new chapter of abundance, and manifestations are rolling in, and like a new career is being carved. And as I was on a hike this morning, I just felt led to really think about the shadow work that I've done and continue to do. And I just had this sense, like the phrase that dropped in was forgiveness, and really looking at the laundry list of people that I hold grudges with. And I didn't realize how long it was. Honestly, I know that sounds so cliche, but like, I actually do a decent amount of this clearing work on a regular basis. But in the last few weeks, I've noticed a pattern. And as a highly sensitive person, and if you're neurodivergent at all, you will recognize like the universe speaks to you in patterns and shapes. And when you pick up on a pattern, it's really like you hone in on it, and it's a method of communication. So like, if you want to get my attention, do something 3 times and I'll be like, oh shit, there's a pattern there. I want to hone in on that. There's a meaning for me there. Now I'm focused on it. And so I have been running into, or had people bring up in conversation, humans that I don't have total peace with. Now, one of these was, I was going to Trader Joe's with my kids on a shopping trip, and I just literally ran into the door. It was raining with my 2 kids. They're beelining to the back of the store to get the kid shopping carts. Like, I don't even shop with an adult shopping cart anymore. It's magical. And I almost run into a previous roommate of mine from college who we left on really bad terms. If I recall, she told me I had no love in my heart, there was no Jesus in my world, and I was full of hate, which, given my highly religious background, and at that time identifying as a Christian, that was like about the worst thing you could tell somebody. And I felt it was highly unjust. And I was like, that's not at all me. Like, how do you think I have no love in my heart? Like, what is happening? So like, needless to say, I haven't run into her in decades, and I run into her. The other night, my husband was asking me about a previous employee. I was like, how do you feel about them? And it was just in a random context. And I was like, wow, interesting. Like, I didn't leave things in a good way with that person. That's funny that that's coming up in my life. This week, I have triggered 2 coaches in my life, people who I really admire, and felt my stomach twist in the conversation, felt really emotionally distraught at the end of those conversations. like their advice to me was a projection of what they needed to tell themselves, and it wasn't intended for me. And I was like, geez, am I being an arrogant asshole, or am I actually intuiting that they're getting triggered and somehow I'm a recipient of that energy and it's actually not at all for me? And then my husband and I have been talking a lot about kind of our relationship and the way it started and some of the learnings and the pains that we've gone through, et cetera. And it's all bringing up for me people who have hurt my feelings, events and experiences that have hurt my feelings that I'm not in perfect resonance with. And yeah, so like imagine this has happened like 12 times this week. So today it was like, you need to do a forgiveness ritual. Now, I don't know a forgiveness ritual. Like in no courses and coaching that I've been a part of, has there been any kind of process involved in forgiveness? So as I'm hiking, I'm sort of like, okay, what would that look like? What would that be? And so I instantly get, okay, you need to sit down and journal and make a list of everyone you feel you have beef with or harbor some kind of hurt or feel like there's some unresolved energy with. It can be mild to severe. I literally, and I'm looking at my journal right now, I should have counted this before I started this podcast because it was surprising to me. I want to say, just eyeballing, I have 5 pages of names, like names of people. Everyone from like a cousin who sexually molested me as a child to in-laws to a grandparent that's no longer with me, right? Like the gamut of characters in my life. Now, if you are not so the process that I kind of channel or kind of download is, okay, write everyone's name down. And because I use pendulums and charts, and I have charts that have like positive feelings and negative feelings, and I love my pendulum because it's sort of energetic proof of where my energy is. And I can kind of go, okay, what energies and lessons have been lessons from these people? And then journal those out. Now, if you don't use pendulums, this does not discount you. This is just being honest about what I'm doing. And you can literally think of like, what has been the main lesson? And even if you make a list of all of the chart of feelings, like there's a beautiful chart online, like Google full chart of human emotions, and you can kind of pinpoint, oh, I feel anger. Well, is it really resentment, or is it really betrayal, or something like that, and really kind of hone in on, ooh, that's more of that energy. Write it out. And then I went through one by one and called forward that soul, because I believe you can clear with person's soul. You don't necessarily have to pick up the phone and call them. Now, if you've done harm and you actually could provide value to that person by picking up the phone and saying, I apologize. Like in this lens, in this body, with this perspective, I very much need to take ownership for what went down. But if it's more on your side of the fence against them, I'm a big believer that you can clear stuff. In fact, I even have resolved pain with ex-boyfriends through dreams. And I was able in a dream to say things that I have never had the opportunity to say in real 3D reality. And I felt a complete clearing with that individual. And I just accepted it as that was my healing process, was that dream was my subconscious mind wanting to release that experience with that person. But if you want to, then I just envisioned each soul coming forward and I would call them out one by one. And I'm in like tears with some of these people going like, man, these are some deep things that I've held on to. And I imagined calling their soul forward and saying, hey, I'm calling forward your soul. I want to thank you for being a teacher in my life. Thank you for being someone who volunteered as tribute to show up in my world with this role, following this script. And here's what my soul received as a lesson as a result of interacting with you. Now, trigger warning. Some of us have some really deep, heavy shit where maybe you want to facilitate this process with a therapist or with somebody that's trauma informed. And this isn't like a do it yourself exercise, because it's really dragging up some deep stuff that you don't feel in safety to navigate on your own. So honor that and go and book a session with someone and really navigate that in an environment that is conducive to your best and highest. I was able to feel personally like this worked for me, even around a cousin that had molested me and as a child, and felt that that was safe for me to experience that kind of a release. What do I want to tell you? Oh yeah. So I imagined the soul coming forward and me saying, like, I honor you as a teacher in my life. I respect, like, I witness and validate that you have played these roles in my life. And here are the lessons that my soul now has learned. Past tense, right? We're not continuing to wish for more learning. I don't know about you. I wish for these to be resolved and transmuted and nullified, if you will. That was my intention. Like, can we close down some of these relationships where there's been some heavy lessons that I just want to acknowledge at a soul level and release from you and from me, so that I am not carrying around the weight and the burden of feeling animosity. For me, resentment, betrayal wounds, hurt, and anger. For me, it's anger is the mask of hurt. And I don't want to roll around life like that. And I certainly feel like there's a big clearing going on in my life. So why not eviscerate the heart while we're at it in a loving and kind way? And so I went through, made my list, and I went through and I thanked all of these souls for the roles that they played in my life. And I want to explain two things about this. I think this will be a shorter episode. Surprise, surprise, it won't be an hour and 40 minutes. But it was such a potent exercise. And I just find I just grew up in a religious context hearing, like, give it to God. Like, let forgiveness just like, I forget what the analogy was. Like, I don't know, some people write and journal and then they burn it. So that would be like one ritual you could do to kind of emphasize the fact that you've released it. But a lot of times the way that forgiveness was described to me is like, you just release it. Well, I'm a very literal person, another sign of neurodivergence. And sometimes those vague theoretical descriptions of how to release something that's a high emotional charge and is a place of pain never actually made any sense to me. Like, 0 sense made. And so it was really profound on this hike to go, like, oh, I feel like there is a method. Like, I'm going to journal everybody's names. I'm going to write out and like really pull out all of the energies that I got from that person, and I'm going to release it. And it was a very emotional experience. And I followed by a sense of liberation and lightness. There's a beautiful children's book, which I wish I had in front of me to kind of show you, but it's from Neale Donald Walsch. He's actually written Conversations with God. It's like a 4-part volume. It's for adults. But this is a man who lived, and I don't know if he was homeless at the time, but he was basically thinking all these esoteric kind of mysteries of the world, the things that we all wonder about. Like, if God is love, how come there's suffering in the world? Like some of those big questions. And he, in his thoughts, was receiving answers that made sense to him, that resonated as truth. So he started to write them down. And they're really celebrated books in the spiritual community, specifically because so many people resonate with it as true. So if that feels right to you, go grab some copies of that or get it on audiobook and just listen to what it is and just let land what needs to let land. It doesn't have to all resonate for you to glean something from it. If that's anything that I've learned from having read the Bible cover to cover, is there is wisdom in all books. Not all of it will land at the same time, and not all of it is meant to land as true. And certainly when it was written, it could have been true, but in this day and age, it could have morphed and is less true, or there's a truer way of understanding it. So Neale Donald Walsch wrote some children's books. I highly recommend these books if you have children. If you're nervous about buying books written by someone who swears they channeled God, totally get it. Side note, that's literally the entire Bible and a lot of religious content or texts. But if that's making you squeamish, I fully understand. I highly recommend buying it and just reading it for yourself. Because the way that one of these books, I think it's like the Child and the Sun or something like that, but it basically talks about how the soul is a spark of God. Like, this is going to get really spiritual here. The idea of like your soul comes from the divine creator, whatever that energy is to you, God, the universe, energy. Like, your soul, your spirit is like a candle coming from this sun, this huge ball of vibrant, fiery energy. And if you were one of thousands of candles out there in the ether, in the universe, how would you know what makes you different? How would you know about things like forgiveness or love or self-control or confidence or kindness and laughter and joy and perseverance and endurance and faith? Because everyone's glowing and everyone's vibrating in an energy of full acceptance and love. So how do you fully understand the full experience of the universe? And so in this sweet conversation that this child's having to the energy of God, he sort of says, like, I would love to learn about what makes me me. And there's like this need for each of us to have an individual experience of the divine, to engage with the elements that create divinity. And so God says, well, you can incarnate and you can go to earth and you can choose what lesson your soul wants to unlock. Side note, this is really intense, depending on what your lived experience has been, to consider. And so I just sort of invite you to throw up plexiglass, if you will, and let this land. And then you can kind of look at it and decide if it is something you want to absorb and feels true to you. But this has resonated so deeply and has made such a profound difference for me in the way that I view forgiveness and the process that I think is a really great process to go through, that allows me the space to still hold boundaries, to still not fully want to engage with someone who's hurt me, but to understand sort of the deeper patterns here in my life. This is like some deep soul work here. And basically the little child says, I want to learn about forgiveness. And God says, great, that's a beautiful thing to learn about forgiveness. For you to experience forgiveness, you're going to need another soul to volunteer, to incarnate with you and play a role in your life that could bring pain to you. But through pain is the only way that you're going to understand the beauty and the power of forgiveness. Are you willing? So the little soul said yes. And another little soul comes and volunteers and says to the little first soul, I'm sorry because I'm going to have to do things that aren't really me, but I hope you remember I'm doing it because I care about you and I love you and I want you to learn forgiveness. I want to be part of you learning about forgiveness. And so it's sort of like about that's sort of the end of it. And like they're going to incarnate and they're going to go through what they go through. But I wrestled with that whole concept when I first bought that book. And I wasn't sure I was going to read to my kids right away because I just had to think about it. And I thought about some of the people that have done the worst things to me. And I just played with this idea. What if they weren't total villains? Like, sure, in my script of Peyton Hughes's life, they for sure picked up the role of villain. And they showed up in these contexts and in this way with a negativity and animosity and a vengefulness about them that harmed and hurt the protagonist of my life story, which is me. And I thought about it and I was like, what if they volunteered as tribute? Like, what if their soul might not be pure evil? Right? Like, entertain that for a hot second. What if their soul is not pure evil? What if their soul is not even evil? What if their soul volunteered because your soul said, in this incarnation, I would like to learn about this, or I would like to master this level of the video game of life, and I need someone to shoot at me or to hurt me so that I can show my strength and demonstrate mastery over me and myself and ascend to the next level. And for me, when I heard that and considered that, it landed as a better way to view something than just to assign someone as you're just pure evil. I want nothing to do with you. I'm cutting you out of my life. And as I've navigated my spiritual awakening and as I'm integrating spiritual and like 5D principles of truth and the 3D reality around me, both in business, personal, etc., like I'm very interested in how I can understand from a macro, from a spiritual lens, things that are hard for me in real time. And forgiveness has always been hard for me. I could sit there and say I've forgiven people, but when I hear their name, my stomach clenches and I feel nauseous. So I haven't forgiven them. Like there was an entire group of people in one side of our family where I was like, I wish vengefulness upon you. And I would love to think of myself as a person who's really interested in spiritual evolution and mastery and being a person of love. So it's like, well, that's clearly not resonant. Like I cannot wish ill upon an entire group of humans that I am not and consider myself an open-hearted healer, right? Like there's no way. That doesn't make any sense. And that's also just part of being human. So I ended up ideating around the fact that whether I don't have to judge someone as being evil or not? What if I don't get to do that? That feels light. That feels refreshing. That also feels a lot more generous. I don't want someone out there judging my soul, whether it's evil or pure, any more than I wish to do that to someone else. But I have experienced harm. So how do I not spiritually bypass this with toxic positivity or just escapism and pretending that I don't have hard feelings towards certain people? How do you navigate that so you really clear that? And it was really powerful. I'm going to read some of these to you and I'm going to obviously hide the identity of the people because it doesn't matter. The lesson isn't in who is Peyton talking about. The lesson is, wow, what if I could reframe certain experiences that I have had in my own experience, in my own life? And I could transmute that, meaning to take energy that might be cloudy or dense and to dissolve it into something light and full of love. Now, we all have that power, whether you've tried it or experienced it or not. When someone comes at you with hate and you can see past their hate into their heart that's hurt, and you can look at them with a lens of love, that is transcendent shit that we all admire. And as long as it's not faked, right? Because no one's admiring fakeness. And then I want to kind of share with you what I really got away as like a major theme for me. So somebody in my life, and I cried about this one. Probably won't cry on this because I've already kind of gone into it. But there's someone in my life who I wrote has taught me lessons in what isn't love. How trauma can permanently damage the brain and cause deep pain and harm into the closest people to them. This person taught me forgiveness, that I was capable of forgiving someone who had done really mean things to me. I witnessed this soul and I thought about, I have a desire for healing and wholeness as a result of witnessing their brokenness and witnessing how broken I felt around them. So that gives me access to a desire to want to be whole. That's a lesson right there. I learned lessons of freedom, and this was a big theme, the importance of women having access to money and freedom in choosing how they live their lives and how they give their time and talent in the world, free of the shackles of gender bias or patriarchal gender roles. And so I was able to take from that person. Now, honestly, if I had gone through this list 10 years ago, it would have been about 17 times longer. So it was really good energy for me to go, wow, none of the old stuff had come up again because I had already forgiven that. But these were deeper, maybe less obvious places for me to go. So I was able to say to that soul, I witness you as a teacher in my life. I accept that there's a good chance you wanted to play this role in my life so that my soul would have access to the deeper wisdom of understanding love, understanding brain damage, understanding what it takes to forgive, understanding the deep desire to be whole and healed, understanding the role for freedom with women. Thank you so much for playing that role in my life. I accept the lessons that my soul was taught, and I no longer want to harbor or hold any resentment, any anger, any malice towards you. And I send you forgiveness for me first, but for you second, because I don't want either of us burdened with this. I want a fresh experience of myself without this baggage in my life. So I did that for that one. The next one I did, I'm trying to think of ones that don't like give it away. For those of you that might be like, what should you talk about? I started to notice things like, for people that it was like, thank you for teaching me about codependency. Thank you for teaching me about what it's like to live without joy, or someone who's not joyful. Thank you for teaching me about what it's like to have someone say they're listening to you, but to feel like they don't hear you. Thank you for teaching me about stinginess with finances, helping me to value generosity. Thank you for teaching me about hating religion and not loving the dogma attached to spirituality. For others, it was, thank you for teaching me about manipulation. Thank you for teaching me about the dark side of patience in toxic relationships. I had a ton of relationships with women where envy was present. In fact, I didn't have a single mentor that I wrote about that didn't have envy for me. And I don't say that as a way of stroking my ego in any way. It's just an obvious theme in my life. There are so many wounds that I have with women, specifically around envy. It has truly made it very challenging for me to make friends and be in connection and in trust with people. So I then looked, after I transmuted kind of every single one of them, and this took me a few hours. This was not very short. And I released all of this. And then I said, what were the patterns? Like if I were to underline, or if you're really into color coding with highlighters, you go back on your notes and be like, okay, for every time a betrayal came up, that's pink. How much pink is on the 5 pages? For every time somebody did escapism and showed me the pain of being in relationship to somebody who uses escapism as a way of not engaging in the ways that they've harmed you and how it perpetrates further harm. And I highlighted that in yellow. And then I went back through blue and was like, with dark energies was coming up a lot of, like, I was perceiving somebody had a really negative energy that was not anchored in love and light. And my experience of them when I witnessed that was them getting highly triggered. It helped to have my pendulum help me select that one, so I didn't think I was just making that up. But honestly, looking back in the rearview mirror is like, oh my gosh, some of the most triggering experiences that I've had to date, there was energetics, spiritual energetics behind the scene that was really troublesome, casting like an impossible energy on us actually understanding each other because we were coming from completely different frameworks. And so when I looked back on some of the key things that came up for me, there were themes of victim, people who acted or were the victim to their own abuse. So like they abuse me or cause harm to me, I could say it that way, and then act like I victimized them. It was like, what? That was a theme. Envy was a big theme. Escapism was a big theme. People faking friendliness with me for social settings and actually like having an energetic tone of, I hate you, get away from me, which unfortunately as an HSP is very loud and very obvious to me. Appeasement or people pleasing is a big theme. Being misunderstood. When I look at all the players who played roles in my life and I look at some of the key themes that came out, I was able to bear witness to what is very probably what my soul said I came here to learn, because the themes were so patternistic. And it was like, and also a mirror to me of things I have been in an energetic match for as well. Another spiritual law is the law of, I'm blanking on it, but it's the law of resonance, maybe. But the idea of what, your inner world is mirrored by, or your outer world mirrors your inner world. So some of the things that we witness in our life, like, I don't know about you, but if you were to look at patterns in your life, would you go, wow, I have an undeniable pattern of people accusing me of X, Y, and Z. Well, if you have more than 3 to 4 people saying you are X, Y, Z, there is something there for you. Whether you write off, and like, you don't want to spend your energy writing off every experience of them, being like, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, and all you've managed to do is protect your ego. There is something far more transcendent if you're willing to be uncomfortable with the fact that if all of you have said that, there is something important for me to witness there. I have had envy in my heart towards many women who I have judged as more beautiful, more talented, more successful, more whatever. Better mother, better whatever people think even I'm good at. I have had envy towards other people. So for me to pick up envy from as deep wounds that I have had, because it's cost me friendships. Like, I, to this day, do not know how to be in relationship to someone where I think they envy me, because I have so many wounds around it. I'm curious how this transmutes that and gives me a different experience. But it was no surprise when I'm picking up on envy and witness to the fact that I have also experienced that in myself. That's part of my shadow. There is an undeniable connection in my experience of the spiritual realm and in the realm of healing and self-mastery. There is an undeniable connection between the stuff that hurts us the most deeply and the way we show up in our wounded state, perpetrating similar ills. This is definitely acknowledged in a lot of different contexts, most famously by the phrase, hurt people hurt people. And oftentimes the way we hurt people is the way we have been hurt. So if we seek a world of harmony, we seek deep resonance and authenticity because we know it's magnetic and it's going to pull abundance into our world, we really want to look at the discomfort of, how have I been harmed? Put names to it, put memories to it, actually journal it out and start to see the patterns, and then look at yourself in the mirror, if you will, and go, my God, I see all of that in me too. And I don't want to show up in the world with any of that energy. I don't want to be a victim in my life. I don't want to have envy towards people I judge as more successful. I don't want to escape my reality when it gets a little uncomfortable. I don't want to fake friendliness because I want to be nice, and the social pressure I can read expects me to fake something with someone who has harmed me. I don't want to be a people pleaser, and I don't want to pretend to listen and actively misunderstand someone. I can transmute, and we can transmute the negative charge that these people have played in our lives and accept them as teachers who have brought forward these lessons to show us what it feels like to experience this as a soul, as a divine spark here on earth, wanting to resolve the painful pieces of ourselves so that we can understand in far greater depths some of these more transcendent principles, and recognize that we probably have similar patterns of harm that we run in the world with. This is courageous work. This is not for the faint of heart. I've dedicated this podcast to all the things that I'm moving through, growing from, and feel are in great service to the ambitious, empathetic women that follow me. And if you're a man, shout out to you for being here. Forgiveness is like cleaning your house. Like, it is like clearing your soul. I'm not going to preach too much about forgiveness because I have been a stingy, like half 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of person with forgiveness for a very long time. And I feel so grateful to have had a different way of experiencing forgiveness and releasing forgiveness, and also witnessing how releasing forgiveness also gave me permission to look at the ways in which I have been in an energy that could have done harm and did do harm to other people. And how can I hold compassion for myself when I've just released all these players who played their role, who read their script in my life as a soul who chose these lessons to learn? If I can release them, I can release me too. And if there's one thing that I know that the world could use a lot more of, especially for high achieving perfectionists who have insane inner critics, which is pretty much all of my audience, we could all use some lightness, some unburdening, lightening the load, and certainly some self-compassion and releasing us from the same cycles and patterns of harm that we would never actually wish to put on anyone. My guess is if you were to really get honest and look at someone who's really harmed you, and you breathed into that, and you thought about the idea of maybe they volunteered to play this horrible role in my life, and I can accept that lesson, learn it, and not have to learn it again. There's an idea around karma that I have found very liberating and not harmful for me to believe, which is we incarnate with some of the cast of characters that created a lot of pain for us in the past. And until we learn the lessons that we need to learn from those people, they keep coming back. I don't know about you, but that's a scary thought. If you believe in multiple lives, which as a perfectionist is a very advantageous thing to accept simply for this reason. If you accept that there are multiple past lives, you're probably an old soul who has experienced a shit ton of deja vu that makes zero sense. Because at some point you're like, yeah, there are parts to me that, like, when I went to Sedona for the first time, my entire body lit up and I felt like I was home and I could have cried. I have never been to Sedona before. Like, never. Why would my body react like that? So when I heard the concept of past lives, I was like, well, that could make sense because I reacted like a long lost child who finally found their mother again, as in Mother Earth with these red rocks. And I was like, I'm home. I'm back. It's me. And I felt like the land remembered me. Like, I know that sounds crazy, but like, I really was like, oh, there's something here. I've been to the first time I went to Yosemite, I was like, whoa, not just is this place beautiful, but like I have been here. I've walked here before. So old souls resonate differently than people who maybe aren't as old. And that does not mean we're better or worse. Like, I want to be really clear. There's zero hierarchy in the spiritual context for this stuff. But there is a sense of certain things resonate as true. Let it resonate as true. And if it doesn't, that's fine. Find what does feel right for you and continue on your merry way. But I will say, like, for perfectionists, if you can believe in multiple past lives, what it gives you access to is a reducing of the pressure to have to be perfect and not fuck up this life. Please don't misunderstand me and hear me saying you can fuck up your life as if it's not going to cause harm to other people, because certainly we know that. That's what this entire episode is about, is forgiveness from people who have done harm. And hurt people. We don't want to add to more hurt in the world. What I'm saying is that what if you were here to learn 2 or 3 lessons and you got to master those 2 or 3 lessons and you didn't have to be perfect at 50 lessons at the same time? And my guess is if you look at the ways in which you've been hurt, the ways in which you get triggered, the ways, the experiences that make you want to fight, you're going to find certain lessons that your soul came here to learn, to master, and to help transmute and heal in the world. That's just my current theory on it. So I'm curious if you experience or explore this. And if you do this exercise, I would love to hear about it. You are welcome. If you're not on my email list, grab any of the freebies in the show notes here and you'll jump into my inbox, or I'll be jumping into your inbox every week with more of my like deeper dive stuff. Or DM me on Instagram. I love to hear what my listeners are taking away from these conversations. And for me, this is a really, really beautiful way to honor the pain and the hardship that we've gone through and be transcendent in the sense of like, I want to send love, not more pain. I don't want to perpetrate more pain in this world, but I want to acknowledge what has been painful and I want to glean what I can from it so I can close down that cycle so it ends with me. And if you are listening, you're probably an old soul and you're probably a cycle breaker. And there is nothing more exciting than going, it dies with me. I don't know about you. That is like a really resonant place for me. I know I am the cycle breaker in my lineage. I know my ancestors are cheering for me. And I have a list of things I will be breaking in this life. I know it. And I know that every time I see me break a cycle that heals my lineage, I get more fired up to break the next one. It doesn't mean that it's not hard. It for sure is. But I stand on the shoulders of my ancestors that went through their shit so that I would have a chance now to do this work. And we want to honor the people that came before us and know that when we heal ourselves, we're healing our children, we're paving new ways for our children, and we're healing retroactively our lineage. That's kind of an interesting thing to wrap my head around. I've just decided that it's true because it feels really good to me to believe that. And I don't believe it does harm to believe that. And I say that as my litmus test for what I'm willing to believe. So I'm curious how this is going to land for you. And I'm really excited to hear what you think about this concept of forgiveness. We'll talk to you next week.